So I just got back from a screening of the new A24 and Hugh Grant horror film called Heretic. But wait, is that blueberry pie? So I did get to go to a early screening of Heretic. It was only a day before the film actually got released in theaters, but it was really fun because they actually gave me a slice of blueberry pie. So I'm definitely going to enjoy that. I haven't had blueberry pie in a very long time. So yeah, Heretic is now in theaters, so let's get into the video. The story follows these two young missionaries who are brought into the home of Hugh Grant's character, Mr. Reed. A very interesting and pretty creepy man that begins to ask some pretty uncomfortable questions to these young women. And all of that leads to them being put into a game of cat and mouse. And the goal is that they have to turn to their faith to escape his house. So this is directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, who are also the writers on A Quiet Place, which is a fantastic horror movie. Also the writers and directors of 65, which is a movie that I didn't personally want to see, but I've definitely not heard good things about that movie. But Heretic, I actually enjoyed this movie a lot. Now, it's been said that Hugh Grant's performance in this movie is one of his best performances ever, and from what I've seen of his work, I personally have to agree. I think that his performance in this is pretty great. Now, Hugh Grant hasn't been in a lot of movies recently. He's done a few cameos and very small roles, but this is his first film in a while where he's actually had like this big role to actually show his acting potential. Or I guess not acting potential, but what he can do with acting. Because yes, he is great in this movie and definitely one of the better parts of it. The film also stars Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, who are also really great in this movie. Chloe East has this very witty humor to her performance and definitely carried some of the more funny parts of the movie, which, by the way, the movie is way more funny than I thought it was going to be. It's kind of a funny, awkward situations turn into this sort of comedic sense. And Sophie Thatcher, of course, has that very lower and very broader tone as far as her character goes, and I think they kind of smash heads with each other, which adds a lot to the story. And as far as the tension and the suspense that's built up over time, I think the movie does a pretty good job keeping the pace pretty well organized. But the one big issue that I have with the movie overall is that there wasn't a lot to be desired. I guess that's what I can say about it, because as far as the plot twists or as far as the big surprises that happen, they kind of show them in the trailer. And I was sitting in the theater and I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, I feel like the scene that's going to happen, I know what's going to happen, and I think it's going to get a reaction out of the theater, and it did, but not from me. I still think it's a pretty cool way of segueing the story from being this just a conversation between these women and this guy into something that's way more scary. And I think it was really interesting. But the fact that they went ahead and put that in the trailer really just lowballed the potential that this movie had at being like making us actually shocked. Now, I won't go too far into that because I'm not going to get into spoiler territory, even though they are in the trailer, so they're technically not spoilers. But another thing I will say to top that off is that I guess the movie really isn't supposed to, we're not really supposed to be surprised that Hugh Grant's character is the villain of the movie. I don't think that's the surprise that I was looking for, because obviously this movie's about these three main people, but I think those little bits of surprise would have added a lot to the movie. I think it would have elevated it way more if they went ahead and just took it out of the trailer, which is I think a lot of trailers are doing nowadays, putting way too much in the trailer to make it so that we're not as surprised or shocked when we're actually seeing the movie in person. But anyways, that's just one little gripe that I had about the movie. It doesn't really take too much away from it. I think if I didn't see what I saw in the trailer that was in the final cut of the movie, I think I would have had a better reaction to it, but it's not that big of a deal. The cinematography is great. There were some very interesting shots in this movie. One in particular that comes near the end of the movie. I won't spoil what it is. I think it's also in the trailer, if I'm remembering it correctly, but when I was watching it in the theater, I was like, dang, that that was a really well orchestrated shot, and I'm so happy that they actually put that in the movie. It was just pretty artsy, and sometimes artsy can be a little bit too much, but I really enjoyed it. I think this is definitely less of a horror film and more of a thriller movie, because there weren't even cheap jump scares in it, which is not a bad thing. And I didn't really go into this movie thinking that there was going to be a lot of jump scares, but considering that it is marketed as a horror movie, I thought there was definitely going to be more jump scares. I think the plot of the movie is the most horrific part, but as far as scaring the audience, it's not much of a horror film. It's more of a thriller movie, which I think it actually works way more as a thriller movie. It's not throwing in those cheap jump scares that a lot of horror movies are doing nowadays, and I respect that and I appreciate that, so that's a plus. I really like the setting. It's kind of like a contained film in which it all takes place in one spot. It doesn't, but it feels like that, and I think that is truly powerful when it comes to this story, because it takes place, you know, on levels upon levels upon levels in one house in which they're trying to escape this hellhole. And there were definitely some moments that caught me off guard. I won't say they were jump scares, but they definitely caught me off guard as far as the movement of the story. And definitely some things happened that I was not expecting. A lot of the stuff that happened, I did expect, but again, that didn't really take away from my enjoyment of the movie. I will say that the first half of this movie is better than the second half of the movie. I don't think the second half of the movie is bad by any means. I just think it runs a little bit on the slower side, which I love slow films. I really appreciate the art of a slow burn, but considering that the first half of the movie really dug into dialogue, and we really had to listen and hear what Hugh Grant was saying, because Hugh Grant has a lot of monologues in this movie. He has a lot of moments where he is just talking forever and is making some pretty valid points with what he's talking about. That's just another thing that I had to say about it, is that the second half of the movie definitely wasn't as impactful as the first half. I think the first half had a lot more of the tension and suspense that I was looking for with this movie. Second half didn't necessarily fail in those regards, but I just think that the first half was better. Get what I mean? The score was great. I think it really elevated the whole entire movie as a whole, really bringing out those creepy parts of it with the music. Back to the performances were great, and the movie was surprisingly funny. It opened up in a way that I was not expecting, where they're having a conversation about condoms, and it's really funny but also enlightening when it comes to like what the movie's about, because I feel like the movie's about how when it comes to religion, there's always going to be, you know, the certain, you know, elements that we feel like we shouldn't be talking about, but we're all human. We're all going to be having these certain conversations. We're all going to be having these certain kind of thoughts, no matter what our religion is. And I think the way it opens up was super powerful and was the driving factor for the rest of the movie. So a really good opening, and really got a lot of laughs out of my theater. But anyways, that was my review for Heretic. I think that this was a pretty good movie with some great acting, some great cinematography, and some really good writing. Second half wasn't as powerful as the first half, but really, this was a pretty good horror movie, thriller movie. So I definitely recommend to go see it in theaters, because I enjoyed it. But anyways, that'll bring us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of it. I appreciate every single one of you. And remember, your movie moment is right around the corner. See you in the next video.